Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing Metropolis Part 2 Scenes from a Memory by Dream Theater.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So this amazing concept album came out in 1999 and it's by the band Dream Theater, probably one of the most known progressive metal bands out there, and I absolutely love this album and I have a bunch of favorite bits from this album that I'd like to share with you all.
4, 3, 2. If at any time you need to come back, all you must do is open your eyes.
To my dream, I shut the door and traveled to another home.
To start off, in 1997, the band, who are already established by then, Dream Theater, has released their fourth studio album called Falling Into Infinity, and that album, unlike the last two that they released, kinda flopped. And when time came in 1999 to record their fifth studio album, their label back then, which were Elektra, decided to loosen the ropes a bit and give the band more creative freedom. And that minute decision that they made has made all the difference in creating Metropolis Part 2. Now, before even listening to this album for the first time as I did, I decided that because I knew that it was so prestigious and so well acquainted with a lot of people, that I should do some research beforehand, and I soon discovered that this was going to be a concept album with a story told in it. So I decided to listen to what the story was about and basically spoil the story for myself, but honestly I did it because I wanted to actually get to understand the music as I was listening for the first time, because I didn't know if I would have the chance to listen to it again before making this video. But honestly, it was so good that I gave it another listen right after. So I will give a quick summary for any of you guys that have never listened to this album and want to get into it but you don't want to be too confused about the plotline. So this is a story basically about a guy named Nicholas who is haunted by memories of another life. So he goes to a hypnotherapist who puts him in this hypnosis, and then he sees that in his last incarnation he was actually a girl named Veronica, which was involved in a love triangle between two brothers and was eventually murdered. And all that I told you just now is basically the plotline for Act 1. Now this is the point where I have to mention that yes, this album is actually split into two acts, and each act has several scenes, and some of the scenes even have some parts. So if you're confused now, That's good. Now, right from the get-go, we start off with the first track called Regression. And although the song titles usually go something like this, as being Scene 1 Regression, I'm just gonna refer to them as the name of the song, and I'm not gonna address what scene it is because I think it would just take up too many words and I don't have any air to spare. No, but I'm just joking. So this album opens up with the track Regression, and I love that track so much. It basically has the hypnosis sequence in which Nicholas succumbs to the hypnosis, and I think it's really mesmerizing, and I could have been hypnotized myself. And for some reason I found this song to be highly emotional, like too emotional to be true. I just started listening to this album, I didn't know what the story was gonna be and feel like, and already I found myself very emotional in this listening. And then of course he succumbs and we get this lovely guitar solo that brings us into this lovely, you know, singer-songwriter sorta section in which we are greeted to Victoria. Now specifically this song really hindered at something that I read about this album. So we know, because Dream Theater have documented most of the creation of this album, that they were inspired by a lot of prog bands, rock bands, and other types of artists and albums into creating this album. Now because this is a concept album, they actually went ahead and looked at a lot of very famous concept albums like, you know, Misplaced Childhood by Marillion or Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and specifically I'm going to talk about The Wall and The Final Cut by Pink Floyd, because I believe that this first song really feels like something that would come off from one of those albums. And when it comes to the storytelling of Metropolis Part 2 Scenes from a Memory, I think it utilizes both ways of telling a story, through its music and through its lyrics. So if you want an example, let's take an album like The Snow Goose by Camel, which tells a story specifically only using instruments and no lyrics at all, and then we'll take an album which we've listened to recently, being An Hour Before Dark by Marillion, which tells a story mostly through its lyrics. And take those two albums and think to yourself, yes, this is the peak performance of how you can do both things in lyrical storytelling and melodical storytelling. Now what Dream Theater is doing on here is taking the best of those two and combining it to one album. So even when there's no lyrics and no words being said, the instrumental sections also really help in getting the story through, and that was really put upon in the second track, being Overture 1928, which is a song that possibly wants us to get acquainted with what time we are in and the fact that Victoria lived it back in those times, and I like it quite a bit, and this is also featured in a lot of sections throughout this album. Now I made the mistake of listening to this album on Spotify, but also reading the lyrics for this album from the Spotify Incorporated feature. Now it was pretty accurate and there's nothing bad about it. The only thing is, if you look at the official lyrics, you can actually see who's saying what, because we have 4 main characters on here, or maybe 5, depends on how you look at it. We have the hypnotherapist, we have Nicholas who's being hypnotized, we have Victoria as past reincarnation, and then we have the 2 brothers of Edward and Julian, and all of them are speaking at certain parts of this album, and because of course it's the same singer in real life, it's really hard to tell which one is which, and they didn't go with Roger Waters' The Wall approach of making different voices for different characters. They just went with the fact that you can infer or read the lyrics and then understand it. And although it wasn't that confusing in the first act, I think that the second act did prove to be a bit confusing, at least to me. When reading the lyrics, I wasn't exactly sure who was speaking and what the album is about at that moment, but I was guided by some really nice reviews and a Wikipedia article about this one, so I could understand the story quite well. So I think by this point I've basically given you a spoiler-free version of this album, because honestly I don't want this album to be ruined for anyone who hasn't listened to it, and if you're doubting whether you should go ahead and listen to it and you're afraid of the length of it or the style of music that Dream Theater makes, just trust me, go ahead, give this album a listen, it's totally worth it. And from this point onward, I'm gonna neglect the story and I'm gonna talk about the music itself as this part of the review. So this album basically features the band with its 5 members. Now everyone is doing a fantastic job, they're all very talented, but honestly the person who shines on here the most has to be a name which I've heard a lot in the past but have never really heard his own works, and that being John Petrucci. Now he plays the guitar on here, and honestly the guitar is the leading instrument found on this album. When there's actual solos, it's usually the guitar. There's a few piano solos here and there, but it's usually his playing on the guitar, and I could not be more thrilled about it. I don't care that we don't have any bass solos or drum solos on here. Honestly, the things that he does on the guitar are so marvelously good that I'm just gonna flow with it. And there's this nice tendency that he does on here which I find extravagantly superb, and that's the fact that he plays always always the correct guitar solos. Now, what I mean by that is, think about a song like Comfortably Numb or Stairway to Heaven and think about their very iconic guitar solos. The fact that they're probably the perfectest solos that could fit on those songs. And what I'm amazed by John Petrucci's work on here is the fact that he always plays the perfectest solo on this album. And his ability to portray the music through his guitar and through what he does on it and the emotions that he brings through to this very emotional story is, well, just breathtaking to me. Now, this is the point where I make a confession I didn't want to make, but I have to. The thing is, I love this album very much, but if you've been watching this channel for a while or if you're new, I would want to tell you all that metal is not totally my cup of prog. Now, I know this is progressive metal, but I don't usually like listening to metal music. This was definitely an anomaly. Like, I really love this one very much, and I was doubting whether this one was a perfect album or not. And as things stand right now, I think that I like the music on here very much, but when it comes to listening to certain songs in particular and standalone songs, I think that I'm gonna pass for now. And this album as a whole is a masterpiece, which is so close to perfection. I am overwhelmed by how close it is. Now, this review is getting kinda long, so I won't be going song to song on this album because honestly, I just can't. I really just can't. There's too much to say about this. I can go on all day, and I've just given this album 2 listens. So persons and people who have listened to this album more than, like, you know, tens of times, hundreds of times, probably can say a lot more, but honestly after 2 listens I can talk about this all day, so I'm just gonna stop. One thing though is my favorite track from here. Now, I was doubting myself, I didn't know which one to choose, so I thought about choosing Regression being the first song because it made me so emotional, and getting into this album and listening to it is so amazing. This track is probably the best opener I've ever listened to an album. But I think I'm gonna go with another track which is also, to me at least, a perfect track, and that being Fatal Tragedy. It's a fantastic song, it features so many good things, the story told on there is just amazing, the guitar solos are brilliant, everything is so good, and honestly it reflects on the entire album being a brilliant album, a staple of modern prog, and a staple of music everywhere and at any time. So this cover is pretty cool, and I think it's definitely not my own taste in the way of making covers, but I still think that it pushes most of my buttons. And if I'm not mistaken, this cover actually has a digital version of it in which all the tiny snippets on here are actually GIFs or videos being on loops, and they form this face, but it's very animated, and I think that's a cool aspect to put into a cover. And honestly, one thing that might keep me awake at night is the fact that the band have worked in the past and will work in the future from this album with the well-known creator of covers in prog being Storm Thorgerson. Now, if you don't know, he created a lot of the well-known covers for Pink Floyd and other well-known bands, but I'm just thinking to myself, what would have happened if he actually worked with Dream Theater on making a cover for this one? And could he actually have made a second Dark Side of the Moon iconic cover for this one? But I guess that's all speculations, but when it comes to this cover, I think it's really cool. It really has this face that I can only assume is Nicholas, and all of his things from the past being shown on him and basically assembling him, and that's pretty cool. I like that idea, and there's this entire, I'd say, conspiracy about the fact that it's just a cycle that is always made again and again in each life cycle, but there's a lot to say about this, and it might be joined to the cover, but I cannot elaborate more because I am not knowledgeable enough. So before I share with you my rating for this album, I just want to ask you all something from the bottom of my heart. There's a lot in the research for this album that I could not find out, that I did not know to look for. There's a lot of tiny Easter eggs probably on this album, and a lot of things that you can entirely go into and delve into and discover more and more. Now, I myself have to move on and make more videos and listen to more albums and write more scripts and do more things. So what I want from you all, from anyone who's watching this video, please write down in the comments things that you know, some tiny pieces of trivia about this album. What do you think about it? Share your opinions with me. I will read them all and hopefully even reply. I'm very looking forward to the interaction with you guys, but when it comes to the rating of this album, this one gets a very appropriate and a very high 9 out of 10. But yeah, that's about it for this amazing album, and that's about it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Stranger Heads Prevail by the band Thank You Scientist. But that is all. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye guys.